So let's imagine that it is in fact possible for you to run faster than the speed of light, and in so doing, travel back in time. It still would be wildly irresponsible.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yes, because Barry, if you were to go into the past, any interaction you had with your parents or yourself, you step on the wrong blade of grass, you have no idea what the consequences to that could be.
No, I know. The butterfly effect, right?
Yes.
I get it. But Bruce, I could fix things. I could save my mom. I could save your parents.
You could also destroy everything. Barry, don't let your tragedy define you.
Hi, Mom.
You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts.
When you go back and change the past, you change the future.
Are you okay out there?
We're fine. I'm fine. I'm in so much trouble.
You're the reason Zod's about to destroy the Earth. Maybe.
Want some help? Yeah. I'm Batman.
Wait, he's Batman? What did you think we were doing here?
I will help you fight Zod.
You can go anywhere in another timeline. Why do you always fight to save this one?
This is the world where my mom lives.
The Flash.
Barry, what are you doing? Our kids are going to want to see this.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. There's a brand new Flash trailer with a bunch more Batman, so we'll break it all down. Also explain Flashpoint Batman 2, because they've obviously changed some things from the comics, but there's a lot of references to the original Flashpoint comics too. During that story, they do a lot of really interesting things with the mythos because of the alternate timeline Flash creates. Always creating amazing things by messing up the timeline, both on the Flash TV show and during the Flash movie now.
I do this time.
That original Flash meme from way back in the first couple seasons is going to last to the heat death of the universe. Like, it's just so perfect in present day. Sure is a nice timeline. Be ashamed if someone mess it up. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. My post-credit scene videos, full Easter egg breakdown videos will start posting tomorrow and Friday all the way through the weekend. There's so much stuff that we have to talk about. Be sure to see the movie as quickly as possible. But at the beginning of the new trailer, you see a much longer version of Ben Affleck's Batman at the beginning of the movie, earlier in the movie, on his new Batcycle, taking down these criminals in Gotham City. It's meant to be just like another save, another day for Batman doing his thing. It's their way of showing you what's happening after the events of the Justice League Snyder Cut. Like, life has continued, Batman is just still being Batman, doing his thing every day in Gotham. The difference with this scene is that it's actually happening in the middle of the day, because usually when you see Batman in Gotham City taking down criminals, it's happening in the middle of the night. The version of the Batcycle that they have during the Flash movie is like a slightly different, upgraded version of an idea that Zack Snyder had for his Batcycle during Batman v Superman in the Justice League movie. I think they would have eventually done it during the Justice League movie, but the idea is that Zack Snyder had all this concept art that they didn't wind up using during Batman v Superman when they introduced his version of Batman. He had some pretty cool technology during Batman v Superman, but it was really during Justice League when he was going to ramp that way up, like the new version of the Batcopter here, which is basically a jet. It was going to be the same thing with his Batcycle, so the version in the movie here has that double wheel in front and the wheel on back, but the version that Zack Snyder was going to go with was actually based on that same jet technology, so there were no wheels, it just hovered in the air basically. You can let me know which version you think is cooler, like the jet version of the Batcycle or the more traditional looking one that they used in the actual movie. He's having a conversation with the Flash about the whole concept of Flashpoint, where he's trying to tell him that the Flash's parents died and Thomas and Martha Wayne, like his own Batman's parents, died. In the trauma of what happened forged them into what they are today. It helped make them better. Even though the fact that their parents died is a terrible thing. While they're cutting scenes of Flash in his Flash costume back in his childhood room. It seems like there are a couple different parts of the movie they edit together where the Flash is coming up with the idea to go back in time. Like, if I could just go back in time, I could fix everything. I could save my parents. I could save your parents, as he's talking to Batman in a completely different scene. In Ben Affleck's Batman's trying to tell him, hell no, don't do that. You could destroy everything, because Batman's older, wiser, and even though it might not completely seem like it, Batman and the Flash actually have a long history of working together because they're both basically crime scene detectives. Like, Batman is the world's greatest detective, and the Flash is a forensic investigator working with the Central City Police Department, so they both kind of do similar things. They actually explored this during the comic, during the Button crossover, where they're actually meeting and talking about detective work together, trying to figure out what's going on with the Watchmen button. So Batman is meant to be very intelligent. In fact, he is the person who created the Flash's ring from the comics that's based on the way that it works in the comics. Obviously, slightly different origin story, made from nanotech in present day as opposed to nanotech from the future. So he also has a rudimentary understanding of quantum physics and how time works, like what happens when you actually try to change the timeline. The short answer is that nothing good winds up happening. And this is where we get to the idea of Flashpoint Batman, because they're doing a couple of different things with the concept during the movie. In the original story, Flashpoint Batman essentially winds up being Thomas Wayne.
Bruce is dead. I watched him die. My God, he's the one who died that night in the alley. Bruce died, and you lived. You're his father. You're Thomas Wayne.
Because in the trailer, when he's talking about saving Batman's parents, like, I could save your parents in Crime Alley from dying, he actually does kind of wind up doing that during the original Flashpoint, but not intentionally. When he does wind up changing the timeline, it also affects Batman's origin story, and in that version of events, in Crime Alley, he winds up being the one who gets killed by Joe Chill, and Thomas and Martha Wayne wind up surviving. And just like the event traumatized Batman and drove him to become the Batman character in the future, the Cape and Cowl, a version that happens to Thomas and Martha Wayne, but it's a much darker version. Thomas Wayne's Flashpoint Batman uses guns all the time, kills villains all the time, and is way more hardcore, way darker. There's been a bunch of concept art of Jeffrey Dean Morgan, obviously because he is the Thomas Wayne of Ben Affleck's Batman universe. Lauren Cohan played his mother Martha Wayne during Batman v Superman. There's also been concept art of the Flashpoint version of her character, and in Flashpoint, Martha Wayne becomes Flashpoint Joker, which arguably I think is a little bit darker, even though Jeffrey Dean Morgan would be like the Negan version of Batman, to make a Walking Dead reference. The funny connection about that too is there's been all these Easter eggs for him on The Boys TV show, which is kind of like a DC parody with the Justice League, the Seven, Homelander. And concept art of him is the Tech Knight character, which is sort of an amalgam version of Batman and the Iron Man character from the Marvel Universe. He'd be amazing in any of the roles because both versions of those characters, like Flashpoint Batman as well as the Tech Knight character, are just totally messed up. Very cool in messed up ways in their own way, but in completely different ways. Like, Flashpoint Batman is definitely dark, just really hardcore, but if you think The Boys TV show has gone over the top with how crazy it gets, how crazy some of the things the characters do are, the things that Tech Knight does in the comics are way beyond that, way more messed up. Within the context of this movie, they're basically giving all that Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Thomas Wayne, Flashpoint Batman story to Michael Keaton's Batman. Michael Keaton is basically the Flashpoint Batman, but obviously a completely different twist on the character because it's the normal version of his Batman just later in his timeline, like he's a much older version of his character from the original Batman 1989 and Batman Returns movies. But this is one of the ideas why Flashpoint fundamentally is a big Batman story for different versions of Batman, because both the Flash and Batman lost their parents in tragic accidents. So the idea is they both have a lot in common. Also, fundamentally, they're both detectives, so to speak. So there's just a lot of things in common between the characters, which is why it's weird that you don't see them working together more in the movies. But in all the Justice League sequels that Zack Snyder planned, like Justice League 2, Justice League 3, a lot of their story is tied up together, like the whole idea with Flash time traveling. Batman gets into a lot of that, like you see in that distant nightmare future. Both of them are working together still. Batman is trying to help Flash and Cyborg try to figure out time travel so that they can save this version of reality. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions about how time travel works inside the DC universe, because obviously they're using this movie and the whole concept of Flashpoint to reboot into James Gunn's DC Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters. This was a big thing when Avengers Endgame came out and they had the big time travel heist, because the Marvel people had their own explanation for how time travel worked, how timelines worked, and now that's like a whole big thing with the multiverse, all the different timelines and the variants of Kang. The interesting thing they've done in the DC universe with the Flash movie is they've actually drawn things a little bit closer by changing the original Flashpoint story. They've changed their explanation for how time travel works, and it's actually a little bit closer to the way that Marvel explains time travel now. Whereas in the original Flashpoint comic book, the explanation for time travel was much simpler. But the Flash movie is actually going with more of a Marvel explanation, where the Flash causes Flashpoint, but what he's doing is he causes a version of hypertime, which is a DC concept, where a bunch of different timelines, a bunch of different possibilities start overlapping with each other. All of reality kind of starts to blend together and get completely messed up. So the whole idea is that he could theoretically destroy everything in the multiverse if he continues to make it worse. There will be some Henry Cavill Superman scenes during this, so he's not completely out of the movie, but all the scenes you see with this version of Supergirl are basically a version of Flashpoint Superman. They're just giving the story to Supergirl instead. Their story plays out pretty much the same way, like he winds up being a much stabbier version of Superman because the military kept him captive underground for so long. Even though it is really cool that Michael Keaton Batman is coming back as his version for this movie, it would have been cool to see Jeffrey Dean Morgan as a version of Flashpoint Batman. He said many times that he is totally willing to come back, and they might have actually thought about it at one point before they got Michael Keaton on board for this. Let me know in the comments, if they do wind up doing Jeffrey Dean Morgan as a version of Flashpoint Batman at some point in the future, how do you want them to do the character? Because they did say that they might wind up doing the Flash, like a Flash sequel movie, just depending on what happens with this movie. Even James Gunn was asked at the Guardians of the Galaxy premiere, what's going to happen with the future of the Flash franchise? And he's like, well, we're just kind of waiting and seeing what happens. Ben Affleck actually joked recently on a podcast about how he felt like this version of Batman that he did in this movie was the best version ever, and how it actually made him want to come back a little bit. Like, I know I said I was out and I wasn't doing any more Batman, but I was so perfect in this movie, I kind of want to come back a little bit, maybe. I wouldn't hold your breath on him coming back, but we might see him cameo in some future major crossover in like the next 10 years. Congratulations, T-Feist22, you're the giveaway winner from my last big Flash video. Please email me on the About page of my channel so I can get your contact details. So everyone click here for that full Flash movie post-credit scene video. I'll update the link as soon as I post that. And click here to watch Batman learn about Henry Cavill's Superman for the first time. Thank you so much for watching. Everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.